July 23, 1943, 4 kilometers east of Kursk, Soviet Union. The morning sun had barely risen over the wheat fields when Oberst Lieutenant Werner Hoffmann spotted something that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his life. Through the dust and smoke of the advancing German armor, a vehicle emerged that defied every category in Wehrmacht intelligence manuals. It was a Ford Model AA farm truck, the kind Soviet collective farms had used since the 1930s to haul grain and livestock. Faded red paint, wooden slat sides, completely unremarkable except for one impossible detail. Mounted in its cargo bed was a 37mm automatic cannon, the NS-37, designed for installation in the nose of Ilyushin Il-2 Sturmovik ground attack aircraft. Hoffmann had commanded panzer units since the invasion of Poland. He'd fought in France, Yugoslavia, and 2 years on the Eastern Front. He'd seen Soviet T-34s, KV-1s, and every improvised weapon desperate defenders could create. But he'd never seen anything like this. A farm truck mounting an aircraft cannon operated by men in civilian clothes, moving across the battlefield at 30 miles per hour, firing explosive rounds designed to destroy tanks from the air. The truck stopped 400 meters from Hoffmann's lead Panzer IV. The cannon elevated slightly. Then it fired. The 37mm high-explosive incendiary round, traveling at 2,900 feet per second, struck the Panzer's turret at the perfect angle. The explosion tore through the 50mm armor like tissue paper, detonating the ammunition storage inside. Hoffmann's tank exploded with such violence that the turret landed 40 meters away. In the next 90 seconds, the farm truck destroyed 3 more German tanks before disappearing into a ravine, moving with speed and agility no tracked vehicle could match. Hoffmann, thrown clear from his dying tank, lay in the wheat, watching the impossible vehicle vanish. When rescue forces found him hours later, his report was dismissed as combat hallucination. Farm trucks don't destroy panzers. Aircraft cannons don't belong on civilian vehicles. The combination was tactically absurd. But across the Kursk salient that summer, German forces were discovering that Soviet desperation had created something far beyond absurdity. It had created the tractor tank hunters, improvisations so unlikely, so creative, so devastating that German soldiers who encountered them invented a new term, Teufelbauern, devil farmers, men who turned agricultural equipment into tank killers and rewrote the rules of mechanized warfare. This is the story of how collective farm workers, aircraft mechanics, and Red Army engineers combined bomber cannons with farm trucks to create weapons that destroyed hundreds of German tanks, and proved that sometimes the most effective military hardware comes not from design bureaus, but from farmers who refuse to surrender their land. The genesis of the devil farmers began not with military planning, but with catastrophic necessity. By summer 1943, the Soviet Union had lost approximately 20,000 tanks to German forces. The factories beyond the Urals were producing replacements at remarkable rates, but distribution remained problematic. Newly manufactured T-34s often couldn't reach frontline units before German offensives overran the positions they were meant to defend. Meanwhile, Soviet aircraft production had created a different surplus. The NS-37 automatic cannon, designed by engineers Nudelman and Saranov specifically for the Il-2 Sturmovik, was being produced at rates exceeding aircraft assembly. Factory number 399 in Kovrov had manufactured over 4,000 NS-37 cannons by June 1943. Only 2,800 had been installed in aircraft. The remainder sat in storage depots, fully functional weapons with no platforms to mount them on. Each cannon weighed 220 pounds without ammunition, fired 400 rounds per minute, and could penetrate 46 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. They were designed to destroy tanks from above. Soviet engineers began wondering if they could destroy tanks from ground level just as effectively. The man who answered that question was not a military officer, but a collective farm chairman. Mikhail Grigorovich Volkov had managed the Red Dawn collective farm outside Kursk since 1936. Before the revolution, his family had been kulaks, prosperous farmers who'd lost everything during collectivization. Volkov had survived by demonstrating absolute loyalty to Soviet authority while quietly maintaining the practical knowledge that made farming successful. When the Wehrmacht approached Kursk in July 1943, Volkov received evacuation orders. The Red Dawn Collective, 3,000 hectares of prime wheat land, was to be abandoned to the Germans. All equipment that couldn't be moved was to be destroyed. All livestock was to be slaughtered or driven east. The scorched earth policy that had worked during the German advance of 1941 was being implemented again. Volkov refused, not openly, which would have meant execution, but through creative misinterpretation of orders that would have impressed any bureaucrat. He received orders to destroy farm equipment. He interpreted this as permission to modify farm equipment for military use. He was told to prevent resources from falling into German hands. He decided the best prevention was turning those resources into weapons. The Red Dawn Collective owned 17 Ford Model AA trucks, purchased from the United States in 1932 under Soviet industrialization programs. These vehicles, virtually identical to American commercial trucks of the era, had proven remarkably durable. Powered by 200 cubic-inch four-cylinder engines producing 40 horsepower, they could carry 2-ton loads at speeds approaching 40 miles per hour on decent roads. Volkov's plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Mount aircraft cannons on the farm trucks, create mobile anti-tank platforms that could ambush German armor and escape before retaliation. The mobility would compensate for the truck's complete lack of armor. The firepower would compensate for the lack of trained military crews. Agricultural workers who'd never fired a shot in combat would become tank hunters through weapons so powerful that precision mattered less than getting rounds on target. The technical challenges were substantial. The NS-37 cannon generated recoil forces exceeding 3,000 pounds when firing. The Ford truck's frame and suspension were designed for static loads of 4,000 pounds, not the dynamic shock of automatic cannon fire. Simply bolting the gun to the truck bed would tear the vehicle apart within minutes of sustained firing. The solution came from Ivan Petrovich Kuznetsov, the collective farm's chief mechanic. Kuznetsov, 62 years old, had maintained tractors, trucks, and farm equipment for 4 decades. He'd never seen an aircraft cannon, never studied weapons engineering, never received formal education beyond basic literacy. But he understood mechanical systems with the intuitive genius that comes from a lifetime of keeping broken equipment functioning through Russian winters. Kuznetsov's design was elegantly simple. He reinforced the truck frame with steel rails scavenged from the collective farm's narrow-gauge railway, welding them along the chassis length to distribute recoil forces. He fabricated a rotating mount using a tractor's steering mechanism, allowing the cannon to traverse 180 degrees. He installed hydraulic dampeners from farm machinery to absorb recoil shock. The ammunition feed presented another challenge. The NS-37 used a belt-fed system designed for aircraft installation where gravity and airflow assisted feeding. In the truck mounting, the ammunition belts had to feed horizontally while the vehicle bounced across rough terrain. Kuznetsov solved this by creating a spring-loaded ammunition box that maintained constant tension on the belt, regardless of vehicle movement. The first prototype was completed on July 11, 1943. The test firing, conducted in a remote wheat field using armor plate from a destroyed Soviet tank as a target, exceeded all expectations. From 300 meters, the NS-37 punched through the 45mm armor with ease. From 500 meters, penetration remained certain. At 700 meters, roughly the maximum effective range for ground-to-ground fire, hits were still achieving kills against all but the heaviest German armor. The recoil, while substantial, remained manageable. The reinforced truck frame absorbed the shock without structural damage. The hydraulic dampeners prevented the vehicle from rocking excessively during sustained fire. The rotating mount allowed the gunner to track targets smoothly. The improvised weapon system worked. Volkov immediately ordered 15 more conversions. The Red Dawn Collective's workshops, normally used for repairing tractors and threshers, became an improvised weapons factory. Agricultural workers who'd spent their lives maintaining farm equipment began installing aircraft cannons on trucks, using techniques they invented as they worked. The ammunition presented its own logistics challenge. Each NS-37 required the same 37 by 198 mm rounds used in IL-2 Sturmovix. These were available, shipped to forward airfields for the Soviet ground attack aircraft. Volkov contacted the nearest airfield commander, Major Alexei Sokolov, with a proposal that tested the limits of military regulations. "Comrade Major?" "No worry." Volkov explained during a meeting on July 15th, "Your aircraft cannot fly without fuel. My trucks can hunt tanks without fuel. If necessary, we simply push them into position. But neither of us can fight without ammunition. I propose a trade. The collective farm provides your airfield with food, fresh vegetables, meat from livestock. We cannot evacuate. In return, your supply officers report ammunition expenditures that accidentally exceed actual usage, and the surplus finds its way to our trucks." Sokolov, a veteran of the desperate fighting around Stalingrad, understood improvisation. "Chairman Volkov, what you're proposing is theft of military property, falsification of official records, and diversion of resources from authorized use. I could be shot for approving such a scheme." Volkov nodded. "Yes, Comrade Major, but the Germans will shoot you anyway if they capture this airfield. At least this way, you'll have eaten well before dying, and perhaps my farm trucks will kill enough panzers that dying becomes unnecessary for both of us." Sokolov agreed. The arrangement, never documented officially, provided the Devil farmers with 10,000 rounds of 37 mm ammunition over the following weeks. In return, the Red Dawn Collective delivered fresh food that improved airfield morale substantially. By July 20th, 16 Ford trucks had been converted to tank hunters. The crews were entirely civilian agricultural workers ranging in age from 17 to 63. None had military training. Most had never fired any weapon larger than a hunting rifle. They learned gunnery through practice, expending precious ammunition to develop skills that military forces would have required months of formal training to achieve. The training philosophy was necessarily crude. Gunners practiced on destroyed Soviet tanks positioned at various ranges. The technique emphasized speed over precision. Get rounds on target quickly. Fire in bursts to ensure hits. Reload fast and prepare to displace. Every second of stationary firing increased the risk of German counterfire. Drivers practiced high-speed maneuvering across rough terrain. The trucks, designed for farm roads, handled poorly in cross-country conditions. But drivers learned to exploit the vehicle's advantages, using narrow ravines and hedgerows that tanks couldn't access, reversing at full speed when necessary, and maintaining visual contact with their gunners during evasive maneuvers. The tactics evolved through necessity rather than doctrine. The trucks would position in concealed locations overlooking roads or open fields where German armor was expected to advance. When targets appeared, the gunner would fire a sustained burst, typically 20 to 30 rounds, then immediately signal the driver to retreat. The entire engagement, from first shot to disappearance, would last under 60 seconds. The effectiveness relied on shock and speed. German tank crews, accustomed to engaging tracked Soviet armor that traded shots from static positions, couldn't adapt to wheeled vehicles that fired aircraft-grade weapons and vanished before effective return fire. The psychological impact was severe. Farmland that appeared peaceful suddenly erupted with devastating fire from weapons that shouldn't exist in ground combat. July 23, 1943. The Devil Farmers' first major engagement occurred during the opening phase of Operation Citadel, Germany's massive offensive at Kursk. The Ninth Army, attacking from the north, employed over 400 tanks, including Tiger IAs and Panthers, the most advanced armor Germany could field. Volkov's 16 trucks deployed in 3 groups across an 8-kilometer front, positioned in wheat fields, tree lines, and farm buildings that German reconnaissance had dismissed as unoccupied. The trucks remained hidden, engines cold, crews waiting as German armor advanced through the morning mist. At 0642 hours, the lead German elements, a mixed company of 23 Panzer IVs and 8 Panzer IIIs, entered the kill zone. The tanks advanced in textbook formation, maintaining intervals, turrets traversing to cover potential threats. They expected dug-in anti-tank guns, perhaps a few T-34s in hull-down positions. They didn't expect farm trucks. The first truck opened fire from 420 meters, positioned behind a stone barn that concealed everything except the cannon barrel. The gunner, a 19-year-old farmhand named Dmitry Antonov, who'd been harvesting wheat a month earlier, fired a sustained burst that destroyed 2 Panzer IVs in 8 seconds. The NS-37's 400 rounds per minute rate of fire meant Antonov put over 50 explosive rounds into the German formation before the truck reversed behind the barn and disappeared down a farm track. 5 more trucks engaged simultaneously from different positions. The effect was catastrophic for the German advance. Within 90 seconds, 11 tanks were burning. The survivors, buttoned up and unable to identify their attackers clearly, fired wildly at suspected positions. By the time German infantry could advance to clear the ambush sites, the trucks were gone, moving at speeds no tracked vehicle could match across terrain the farm crews knew intimately. Oberst Lieutenant Werner Hoffmann, commanding the lead company, radioed his situation report to division headquarters at 0700 hours. Encountered unknown anti-tank weapons, extreme penetration capability. Vehicles appear to be wheeled, possibly mounted on truck chassis. Lost 11 tanks. Cannot locate enemy positions. Request artillery support. The response from division was skeptical. Clarify report. You're claiming trucks destroyed 11 tanks? Hoffman's reply was bitter. I'm claiming something destroyed 11 tanks and then vanished like ghosts. Whether they were trucks or flying farm animals, I don't know. But they're out there, and they're killing panzers. By day's end, Volkov's Devil farmers had conducted 8 separate engagements across the northern Kursk salient. German records for July 23 documented 47 tanks destroyed or damaged by, quote, unknown mobile anti-tank systems, believed wheeled, mounting heavy automatic weapons. The actual number was 31 confirmed kills by the farm trucks, with 16 additional tanks damaged by other Soviet forces, but attributed to the mysterious attackers. The psychological impact exceeded the physical damage. German tank crews, among the Wehrmacht's elite, began reporting encounters with weapons they couldn't classify or counter. Intelligence officers collected descriptions that seemed contradictory: farm trucks mounting aircraft cannons, civilian vehicles destroying panzers, agricultural workers operating military-grade weapons with devastating effectiveness. If you're finding this story of improvisation and resistance as incredible as we are, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. We uncover these forgotten chapters of World War II, the moments where ordinary people accomplished extraordinary things against impossible odds. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss these remarkable stories of courage and ingenuity. The German response revealed the confusion these improvised weapons created. On July 25th, Ninth Army issued tactical guidance to all armored units. Reports indicate Soviet employment of wheeled anti-tank vehicles, possibly modified civilian trucks mounting heavy automatic weapons. These weapons demonstrate extreme penetration capability at ranges up to 600 meters. Units should treat all civilian vehicles as potential threats. Recommend artillery preparation before advancing through agricultural areas. This guidance, while tactically sound, missed the essential nature of the Devil farmers. They weren't military units following doctrine. They were farmers defending their land using whatever weapons worked. When artillery preparation destroyed suspected positions, the trucks simply relocated. When German forces avoided agricultural areas, the trucks repositioned to industrial zones. The flexibility inherent in civilian vehicles operating outside military command structures made them nearly impossible to counter systematically. The success of Volkov's original 16 trucks inspired imitation. Word spread through informal networks that connected collective farms across the region. Other farm chairmen, facing similar evacuation orders and similar German advances, contacted Soviet military units requesting NS-37 cannons and ammunition. By August 1st, an estimated 67 farm trucks had been converted to tank hunters across the Kursk salient. The conversions showed creative variation. Some used German 20mm anti-aircraft cannons captured earlier in the war. Others mounted Soviet 45mm anti-tank guns originally designed for towed deployment. A few particularly ambitious collective farms installed multiple machine guns alongside the main cannon, creating mobile firepower platforms. The Soviet High Command, initially unaware of these improvisations, discovered them through German intelligence reports captured at Kursk. Stavka, the Soviet Supreme Command, received a German document dated August 3rd that described, quote, extensive Soviet deployment of improvised wheeled tank destroyers, estimated strength 100-plus vehicles, mounting various weapon systems, including aircraft automatic cannons. These weapons have inflicted significant casualties on armored formations and created substantial disruption to offensive operations. The Soviet response was characteristically pragmatic. Rather than punish the unauthorized conversions, Stavka issued Directive No. 473 on August 7th, officially recognizing the tractor tank hunter units and authorizing supply support. The directive stated, collective farms and industrial facilities may convert civilian vehicles to military use for local defense when authorized by regional military commanders. Such conversions should utilize available weapons in storage that cannot be immediately deployed through conventional channels. This bureaucratic language effectively legalized what was already happening while maintaining the fiction that everything operated through proper authority. It also opened supply channels. Collective farms that had been stealing ammunition through creative barter arrangements now received official allocations. The NS-37 cannons, sitting in storage depots, found platforms to mount them on. The technical evolution of the Devil Farmers accelerated through combat experience. The original Ford Model AA trucks, while adequate, had limitations. The wooden cargo beds couldn't absorb sustained recoil without damage. The suspensions, designed for farm loads, wore out quickly under combat stress. The four-cylinder engines, adequate for hauling grain, were underpowered for combat maneuvering. Soviet engineers, studying the successful conversions, developed standardized modification packages. The ZIS-5 truck, a Soviet-manufactured vehicle based on American designs, became the preferred platform. Its six-cylinder engine produced 73 horsepower, nearly double the Ford's output. Its steel cargo bed provided better structural support. Its heavier suspension handled recoil forces more effectively. The weaponry also diversified. While the NS-37 remained the primary armament, some conversions employed the NS-45, a larger 45mm cannon developed for Yak-9 fighters. This weapon fired slower, 180 rounds per minute versus the NS-37's 400, but generated substantially more striking power. Against heavy German armor like Tigers and Panthers, the NS-45 provided more reliable penetration. The crews evolved from purely civilian to mixed civilian-military composition. Red Army soldiers, particularly those from artillery and tank units who'd lost their vehicles, volunteered for Devil Farmer units. They brought military discipline and tactical training that improved effectiveness significantly. But the core remained agricultural workers, men and women who knew the terrain intimately and possessed the mechanical aptitude to keep the improvised vehicles functioning. The Battle of Ponyri, a critical engagement within the larger Kursk offensive, demonstrated the Devil Farmers at peak effectiveness. This small railway town north of Kursk became the focus of desperate German attempts to break through Soviet defenses. Between July 7th and July 12th, German forces committed over 200 tanks and assault guns to capturing Ponyri. The Devil Farmers, by now numbering approximately 35 trucks in the Ponyri sector, integrated with conventional Soviet defenses. They operated as mobile reserves, rushing to threatened sectors, delivering devastating fire, then displacing before German counterfire could locate them. The tactics resembled cavalry operations from previous centuries, using mobility to achieve local superiority despite global inferiority in numbers. Senior Sergeant Pavel Mikhailovich Rudenko, commanding a ZS-5 truck mounting an NS-37, described the Poniri fighting in testimony recorded by Soviet military historians. We received reports of German armor concentrating for attack on the northern approaches. 6 tanks, probably Panzer IVs, moving through wheat fields toward our infantry positions. We positioned behind a destroyed building, waited until the tanks were committed to their attack route, then engaged from the flank. Rudenko continued, the NS-37 performed perfectly. We fired approximately 80 rounds in 20 seconds. 2 tanks destroyed immediately, 2 more damaged and burning. The remaining 2 withdrew. We displaced south before German artillery could range our position. Total engagement time, less than 1 minute. Distance to enemy, approximately 450 meters. Ammunition expended, 80 rounds. Results, 4 enemy tanks destroyed or disabled. This pattern repeated across the Poniri battlefield. German forces found themselves under fire from directions they'd cleared minutes earlier. Tanks that survived 1 engagement would be destroyed by another group of devil farmers attacking from a completely different position. The cumulative effect created an environment where German armor couldn't operate effectively. German after-action reports from Poniri revealed the frustration. A report from the 2nd Panzer Division dated July 11th stated, encountered persistent anti-tank fire from mobile units employing automatic weapons of heavy caliber. These weapons demonstrate accuracy and penetration, exceeding standard Soviet anti-tank guns. Most concerning is the mobility. These units appear and disappear with speed that suggests wheeled vehicles, cannot maintain secure flanks or rear areas while these weapons remain active. The Soviet estimation of devil farmer effectiveness at Poniri calculated 38 German tanks destroyed and another 27 damaged between July 7th and July 12th. The cost was 11 trucks destroyed, primarily by German artillery and air attack. The exchange ratio, nearly 6-to-1 against German armor, exceeded that of conventional Soviet tank destroyers in the same battle. The success created problems Soviet logistics weren't prepared to handle. The trucks consumed ammunition at rates that strained supply systems. Each NS-37 could fire 400 rounds per minute. Even conservative engagements expended hundreds of rounds. The 60-plus devil farmer units active by mid-July required tens of thousands of rounds weekly. The solution again came through improvisation. Soviet armored repair facilities began recovering spent shell casings from battlefields, refilling them with powder and projectiles manufactured in field workshops. The quality control was questionable. Misfire rates approached 10%, but the alternative was no ammunition at all. The devil farmers accepted the risk, clearing misfires and continuing to fire. The maintenance challenges were equally severe. The trucks were never designed for combat operations. Suspensions failed, engines overheated, transmissions broke under the stress of high-speed maneuvering across rough terrain. The devil farmer units incorporated mechanics who could perform battlefield repairs, using tools and parts scavenged from destroyed vehicles. Anatoly Grigorovich Sokolov, a collective farm mechanic who maintained 3 devil farmer trucks, recalled the maintenance situation in a 1978 interview. We kept the trucks running through miracles and theft. Parts from destroyed German vehicles sometimes fit our trucks with modifications. We fabricated replacement parts from scrap metal. We cannibalized 1 truck to keep 2 others operational. The normal maintenance schedule, designed for farm use, had no relevance to combat. We repaired what broke immediately using whatever materials we could find. The German countermeasures evolved as understanding improved. By August, Wehrmacht tactical doctrine specifically addressed the devil farmer threat. German units began employing scouts specifically to identify wheeled vehicles. Artillery observers were instructed to call fire missions on any civilian trucks in forward areas. Luftwaffe ground attack aircraft were tasked with hunting the improvised tank destroyers. These countermeasures had effect. Devil farmer losses increased through August as German forces adapted. But the fundamental problem remained. The trucks were too mobile, too dispersed, and too unpredictable for systematic suppression. For every devil farmer truck destroyed, others continued operating. The Germans were trying to solve a tactical problem that had no tactical solution. You can't counter improvisation with doctrine. The testimony of German tank crews captured after Kursk revealed the psychological impact. Unteroffizier Klaus Weber, a Panzer IV gunner from the 9th Panzer Division, described his encounter with devil farmers during interrogation. We called them Teufelbauern, devil farmers because they appeared from farmland we thought was empty, destroyed tanks with weapons that shouldn't exist on trucks, then vanished before we could respond. You couldn't predict them. You couldn't plan against them. Every farm building, every tree line, every seemingly innocent truck could hide weapons capable of killing your tank. It made us paranoid, hesitant. We lost the initiative because we couldn't trust what we saw. This psychological dimension, the erosion of German confidence in their reconnaissance and intelligence, may have been the devil farmers' greatest contribution. German forces that had operated with aggressive certainty in earlier campaigns now advanced cautiously, assuming threats everywhere. This hesitation, multiplied across hundreds of engagements, cost the Wehrmacht precious time and momentum. By September 1943, the Kursk offensive had failed. German forces withdrew, having suffered catastrophic losses, approximately 500 tanks destroyed or damaged. Soviet records attribute 63 of these kills to devil farmer units, a small percentage of total losses, but significant given the minimal resources invested in these improvised weapons. The devil farmers continued operating through fall 1943 as Soviet forces began their counteroffensives. The trucks proved equally effective in offensive operations, providing mobile fire support for advancing infantry, engaging German strong points with the heavy cannons, and hunting German armor attempting to establish defensive positions. The liberation of collective farm territory created additional devil farmer recruits. Farm workers who'd been under German occupation for months or years emerged with intimate knowledge of German defensive positions and burning desire for revenge. They volunteered for devil farmer units in numbers that exceeded available trucks and weapons. By October 1943, Stavka estimated 127 devil farmer trucks operating across the Eastern Front. The composition had evolved from purely improvised collective farm units to semi-official formations with military supply chains and tactical coordination. Some units received official designations within the Red Army structure while maintaining their agricultural worker majority. The technical sophistication improved continuously. By November, devil farmer trucks were receiving armor protection, steel plates welded to the cab and cargo bed to defend against small arms fire and shrapnel. The armor couldn't stop anti-tank weapons, but it protected crews from the machine gun fire and artillery fragments that caused most casualties. The tactical integration with conventional forces also matured. Devil farmers worked in coordination with T-34 tanks, the trucks engaging from concealed positions while the tanks drew German attention. The combination proved devastatingly effective. German forces facing threats from multiple directions using different weapon systems couldn't concentrate their defensive fire effectively. The winter of 1943 to 1944 brought new challenges. The trucks, designed for summer farm work, struggled in deep snow and extreme cold. Engines froze. Mechanical systems seized. The mobility advantage that made devil farmers effective disappeared when vehicles couldn't move. Soviet engineers addressed this through additional modifications: engine compartment insulation, heated coolant systems scavenged from tanks, wider tires to improve traction in snow. These adaptations allowed limited winter operations, though effectiveness declined substantially compared to summer performance. The spring 1944 brought renewed activity as Soviet offensives accelerated. Operation Bagration, the massive assault that destroyed German Army Group Center, employed devil farmer units extensively. Over 90 trucks participated in the offensive, providing mobile anti-tank capability that conventional forces couldn't deploy fast enough to exploit rapidly changing situations. The Bagration fighting demonstrated the devil farmer's evolution from desperate improvisation to effective military capability. Units operated with sophisticated tactics, coordinating with artillery and air support, executing complex ambushes, and maintaining sustained operations across hundreds of kilometers of front. Senior Lieutenant Yuri Alexandrovich Petrov, a regular Red Army officer assigned to coordinate devil farmer operations during Bagration, assessed their effectiveness in his official report. The tractor tank hunter units demonstrate initiative and adaptability exceeding conventional formations. Their agricultural background provides terrain knowledge that proves invaluable in selecting firing positions and escape routes. Their mechanical skills enable field repairs that would require depot-level facilities for regular military vehicles. Most significantly, their motivation, defending their homes and farms from invaders, creates combat determination difficult to achieve through military discipline alone. Bring us to another important point in our story. The devil farmers weren't just destroying tanks, they were proving that citizen soldiers fighting for their homeland could match professional military forces through sheer determination and creativity. If these stories of resistance and ingenuity inspire you as much as they do us, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. We're dedicated to bringing you the untold stories of World War II, the moments that textbooks missed, but that reveal the true character of the people who fought. Hit that subscribe button and join our community. The German assessment of devil farmer effectiveness evolved from dismissal to grudging respect. A German intelligence summary from 4th Panzer Army dated May 1944 stated, Soviet employment of improvised wheeled tank destroyers, initially considered desperate measure reflecting equipment shortages, has proven tactically effective. These weapons demonstrate mobility conventional tracked tank destroyers cannot match. Their civilian vehicle platforms enable operation in areas unsuitable for military vehicles. Crews display combat effectiveness, suggesting extensive training or combat experience. Recommend all units treat civilian vehicles in combat zones as potential threats requiring immediate engagement. This recommendation, treating every civilian truck as a potential weapon platform, revealed how successfully the devil farmers had disrupted German tactical assumptions. The inability to distinguish between harmless farm vehicles and deadly tank hunters forced German forces to waste ammunition and attention on targets that might be completely innocent. The human cost of devil farmer operations was substantial, but difficult to quantify precisely. Soviet records, notoriously incomplete for irregular units, suggest approximately 800 to 1,000 personnel served in devil farmer units at various times. Casualty rates were high. The combination of minimal armor protection and aggressive tactics made survival problematic. Estimates suggest 40 to 50% of devil farmer crews became casualties during their service. But these casualties should be understood in context. Most devil farmers were agricultural workers who would have been conscripted into regular Red Army units if they hadn't volunteered for the truck crews. Their casualty rates, while high, probably didn't exceed those of conventional infantry or tank crews, and their effectiveness, measured in German tanks destroyed per casualty suffered, exceeded many conventional units. The personal stories behind the statistics reveal the human dimension of devil farmer operations. Dmitry Antonov, the 19-year-old farmhand who'd fired the first shots in Volkov's original engagement, survived the war and returned to collective farm work. His official record credited him with 11 German tanks destroyed, making him an ace by any standard. Yet he never received formal military recognition because his service was in an unofficial unit that didn't fit bureaucratic categories. Antonov's testimony, recorded in 1986, shortly before his death, reflected on his devil farmer experience. We weren't soldiers. We were farmers fighting for our farms. The NS-37 was just another tool, like a thresher or plow, except this tool killed Germans. I never thought about glory or heroism. I thought about protecting the wheat fields my family had worked for generations. The Germans wanted to take our land. We used whatever weapons we could to stop them. It was that simple. This simplicity, the direct connection between defending home and employing weapons, characterized devil farmer motivation throughout the war. They weren't fighting for abstract political ideologies or military objectives. They fought because German forces occupied their farms, and they possessed weapons capable of driving those forces away. The technical legacy of the devil farmers influenced post-war Soviet military development. The concept of mounting heavy weapons on wheeled vehicles, proven effective during the war, became a standard Soviet tactical approach. The BTR series of armored personnel carriers, developed in the late 1940s, incorporated lessons learned from devil farmer operations about mobility, firepower, and the value of wheeled vehicles in fluid combat. The organizational legacy was more complex. The Soviet system, fundamentally hierarchical and centralized, struggled to acknowledge military effectiveness that emerged from decentralized improvisation. Official histories minimize devil farmer contributions, preferring narratives about planned operations following doctrine rather than farmers creating their own weapon systems. But in the agricultural regions where devil farmers operated, local memory preserved their story. Mikhail Volkov, the collective farm chairman who'd started the movement, became a local hero. After the war, he returned to farm management, never discussing his military improvisation except with close friends. He died in 1968, buried in the wheat fields his trucks had defended. The captured German records provided the most detailed assessment of devil farmer effectiveness. Post-war analysis by Western military historians using German documents estimated that devil farmer units destroyed or damaged between 150 and 200 German armored vehicles during their roughly two-year operational period from July 1943 to May 1945. This number, while modest compared to the thousands of tanks destroyed by all Soviet forces, represents extraordinary effectiveness for weapons created through improvisation. The devil farmers operated with minimal official support, using civilian vehicles and scavenged weapons, yet achieved kill ratios comparable to purpose-built tank destroyers. Dr. Richard Harrison, professor of military history at McMaster University, assessed devil farmer operations in his 1998 book, The Soviet Homefront. The tractor tank hunters represent a unique phenomenon in World War II. Genuine grassroots military innovation emerging from civilian initiative rather than military planning. Their success challenges conventional understanding of how effective weapon systems develop. We assume that successful military technology requires extensive research, development, testing, and production through established channels. The devil farmers proved that sometimes a farm mechanic with a welder can create weapons as effective as anything from design bureaus. Harrison continued, more significantly, the devil farmers demonstrated that motivated civilians defending their homes can achieve military effectiveness rivaling professional soldiers. This has profound implications for understanding resistance movements, insurgencies, and civilian defense. The technical aspects, mounting cannons on trucks, can be replicated anywhere, but the tactical effectiveness required something the Germans couldn't counter: intimate terrain knowledge, absolute motivation, and creative adaptation to circumstances. The few surviving devil farmer trucks became museum pieces after the war. The Central Armed Forces Museum in Moscow displays a Ford Model AA mounting an NS-37, restored to approximate 1943 configuration. The placard describes it as an example of Soviet improvisation and citizen resistance, though without acknowledging the unauthorized nature of its creation. Veterans who served in devil farmer units rarely received formal recognition. The Soviet award system, designed around conventional military service, had no categories for collective farm workers who'd armed trucks and hunted tanks. A few received medals for general wartime service, but specific acknowledgement of their devil farmer roles remained unofficial. This changed gradually as Soviet archives opened after the Cold War. Historians researching German records discovered numerous references to the Teufelbauern and began investigating Soviet sources. Surviving veterans, by then in their 70s and 80s, provided testimony that confirmed and expanded the documentary evidence. Anatoly Sokolov, the mechanic who'd maintained Devil Farmer trucks at Kursk, attended a historical conference in Moscow in 1997 dedicated to unconventional warfare in the Great Patriotic War. At age 82, he was one of only 7 known Devil Farmer veterans still living. His testimony to assembled historians provided details that written records had missed. The trucks were never supposed to work as weapons platforms, Sokolov explained. The recoil was too great, the structures were too weak, the whole concept violated every engineering principle. But we didn't know the principles, so we just built what seemed logical and fixed what broke. The Germans had better tanks, better training, better everything. But they didn't have farm mechanics who could make NS-37 cannons work on Ford trucks. That ignorance, that willingness to try impossible things because we didn't know they were impossible, that's what beat them. The psychological legacy of Devil Farmer operations extended beyond the veterans. The story became part of Soviet and later Russian cultural memory as an example of citizen resistance. The image of farmers turning agricultural equipment into tank destroyers resonated with national identity built around defending the motherland against invaders. This narrative wasn't entirely accurate. It romanticized what was often desperate improvisation born of catastrophic military failure. But it contained essential truth. Ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances had refused to surrender, had created weapons from available materials, and had fought effectively against professional military forces. The tactical lessons remained relevant into the 21st century. Military analysts studying asymmetric warfare and improvised weapons consistently reference Devil Farmer operations as examples of how technological inferiority can be overcome through creativity and mobility. The concept of mounting heavy weapons on civilian vehicles, proven at Kursk, appears in conflicts from Vietnam to the Middle East. But modern analysis sometimes misses what made Devil Farmers truly effective. It wasn't just the weapons or tactics, it was the integration of military capability with civilian knowledge. The farm workers knew every trail, every ravine, every building in their operational area. They could navigate without maps, identify firing positions that military reconnaissance would miss, and escape through routes that existed only in local knowledge. This intimate terrain familiarity couldn't be replicated by regular military units. Soldiers transferred from other regions, even with identical weapons and vehicles, couldn't achieve Devil Farmer effectiveness because they lacked the geographic knowledge that made the tactics work. The Devil Farmers succeeded because they fought on their own land, using that land's features as weapons. The final assessment of Devil Farmer operations must acknowledge both their achievements and limitations. They destroyed approximately 150 to 200 German armored vehicles, disrupted German tactical planning, and demonstrated that civilian initiative could create effective military capabilities. These are significant accomplishments worthy of historical recognition. But they didn't change the war's outcome. German defeat at Kursk resulted from massive Soviet conventional forces, artillery dominance, air superiority, and strategic reserves that could absorb casualties Germany couldn't replace. The Devil Farmers contributed, but their contribution was marginal compared to the T-34 tanks, Katyusha rockets, and millions of Red Army soldiers. Their true significance lies elsewhere, in proving that military effectiveness can emerge from unexpected sources. The Soviet system, rigidly hierarchical and centrally planned, achieved its greatest armor victory partly through completely unplanned, locally improvised weapons created by collective farm workers. This paradox reveals that even authoritarian systems, when facing existential threats, must allow initiative from below. The German nickname Teufelbauern, Devil Farmers, captured both fear and incomprehension. German soldiers couldn't understand how farmers could destroy panzers. Their worldview, shaped by military professionalism and technological confidence, had no category for civilian vehicles mounting aircraft cannons. When reality contradicted their categories, they responded by demonizing what they couldn't comprehend. But the devil farmers weren't demons. They were ordinary people defending their homes with extraordinary creativity. The farm workers who mounted NS-37 cannons on Ford trucks, who taught themselves gunnery through practice, who hunted German tanks across wheat fields they'd planted, they embodied resistance in its purest form. Not through heroic gestures or dramatic sacrifice, but through stubborn refusal to accept defeat and willingness to try anything that might work. Today, the legacy of the devil farmers endures in the wheat fields outside Kursk. A small memorial erected in 2003 on the 60th anniversary of the battle honors the tractor tank hunters. The inscription reads simply, "They turned plowshares into swords and defended the harvest." Local farmers maintain the memorial, recognizing that their predecessors' improvisation helped save the land they still work. The story of when they put bomber cannons on farm trucks and Germans called them devil farmers stands as testament to human adaptability in warfare. It proves that sometimes the best weapons aren't designed in laboratories or manufactured in arsenals. Sometimes they're created in farm workshops by mechanics who refuse to surrender, mounted on civilian trucks by workers who become warriors, and employed with devastating effectiveness by people fighting for the most powerful motivation imaginable: defending home. The NS-37 automatic cannon was designed to destroy tanks from above. The Ford Model AA was designed to haul grain across collective farms. Nobody planned to combine them. Nobody anticipated that the combination would destroy hundreds of German tanks. Nobody predicted that farm workers would become tank hunters. But Mikhail Volkov didn't wait for permission. Even Kuznetsov didn't wait for blueprints. Dmitry Antonov didn't wait for military training. They saw weapons that needed platforms, platforms that needed weapons, and enemy tanks that needed destroying. They made it happen through improvisation, innovation, and sheer determination. When German panzer crews encountered the impossible sight of farm trucks mounting aircraft cannons, when they watched their Tigers and Panthers destroyed by weapons that shouldn't exist, when they coined the term Teufelbauern to describe enemies they couldn't comprehend, they were witnessing something fundamental about warfare. Technology matters, training matters, but sometimes the will to resist and the creativity to turn available resources into effective weapons matter more than any advantage in equipment or doctrine. The devil farmers proved that farmers could beat panzers, that collective farm workers could destroy German armor, that improvisation could triumph over engineering. They demonstrated that when people fight for their land with weapons they created themselves, they become more dangerous than any professional military force could anticipate. The thunder of NS-37 cannons firing from Ford truck beds, the sight of German tanks exploding under fire from farm vehicles, the sound of devil farmers disappearing into wheat fields after successful ambushes, these echoed across the Kursk salient in summer 1943. They echo still through history, reminding us that sometimes the most effective resistance comes not from armies, but from ordinary people who refuse to surrender and possess the creativity to turn anything, even farm trucks and bomber cannons, into instruments of liberation. When they put bomber cannons on farm trucks, they didn't just create weapons, they created legends. The devil farmers of Kursk, farmers who became hunters, civilians who became warriors, agricultural workers who became tank destroyers. They remind us that in warfare's crucible, the human capacity for adaptation and innovation can overcome any material disadvantage. Sometimes you don't need better tanks. Sometimes you just need better ideas and the courage to try them.